Hey guys, what's up? This is Meathead Mikkel from MeatheadGaming.com, and today I'm going to show you guys the fire wizard that I've been putting together. This build is still not 100% complete. I need to reroll one item and I'm looking for another one, but it's pretty much done. And I'm going to go over the build and the skills and a couple weapon variations and kind of playstyle variations. But first off, this is Torment 4 solo. Let's just go ahead and see what we can do here on T4, and I'm not going to pop that pylon, just so you guys can see kind of how quickly this works, or how quickly this kills stuff. And I'm going to be switching from a cold build into fire. It has a lot more in-game damage potential just because of itemization and because of Cinder Coat. So there's an elite right there. The only downside to this build, for solo play really, there's really no downsides in group play, but for solo play the only downside is it doesn't have a snare. So it's a little bit, you gotta kite a little bit more, and you have to get pretty good at casting the meteors, correctly. But let's just go ahead and see what this looks like without channeling, how quickly it takes down white mobs. So there you go. And you just guys saw it on an elite. And I'll do a little bit more gameplay later, but let me just go ahead and explain to you what this build is, how it works, and that sort of thing. And this will take you all the way to T6 with proper gearing in solo play. And you really don't need that much sheet DPS or that much toughness to do this, because the way the game is kind of designed, you only need to meet a certain toughness threshold before you just kill everything. Because if you have, half this damage output but twice the toughness, well, you'll survive, but it's going to take you twice as long to kill something. Whereas if you have lower toughness but really high damage output, you just burn everything down, and then you don't need the extra toughness because you're in combat less and you don't take as much damage. So, first things first. This build requires a lot of extra plus fire damage and a Cinder Coat. It will not work very well at all without a Cinder Coat, and that's why I've been waiting so long to switch to it, just because it doesn't work without it. So, and I found this just a few days ago. So anyway, skills. And this is something that a lot of people have been doing. So this isn't like some brand new build, but I do have a couple of variations that I'm going to talk about. So when on the off chance that you do run out of AP, you're going to be using Magic Missile, Conflagrate, very, very, very powerful. And the best in slot offhand source for this is going to be Mirror Ball with the 2 magic missiles that it fires. Unfortunately, I did find one, but I salvaged it because it only had the +1 magic missile and the damage on it rolled kind of low. So I'm still looking for that. That's the one piece that will make this particular variation of the build complete. Don't have that yet. Oh well. But that's going to be your your left mouse button. Only really use it when you're running out of AP. Spam meteors, meteor shower. Pretty straightforward. Teleport Wormhole, this is your defensive slot here. I still prefer Wormhole. I think it's the best teleport rune. If you're trying to do this on T6, I can see how Safe Passage would also be very good. But for now, I'm still sticking with the Wormhole. Familiar Sparkflint, just for the extra damage output. If you don't really, if you're already doing a lot of damage, but you run out of AP too quickly, which really you shouldn't be, but then you can switch to Arcanaut. I prefer to just have higher hitting or heavier hitting meteors, so I can just burn stuff down faster and don't have to worry about the resource management. Armor, I'm using energy armor. For Torment at my level of toughness and my level of gear, I'm using prismatic armor on Torment 4 and up, and Torment 3 and below I would use Pinpoint Barrier. You could also use Storm Armor, Power the Storm, but it's actually not as good because Meteor is such a high arcane power cost skill anyway that Power the Storm doesn't reduce the cost that much percentage-wise. So I don't use it for this build. So anyway, energy armor, and then if you have enough toughness, go for pinpoint barrier. If you don't, go for prismatic. Magic weapon. Force weapon is not as good as ignite because because of the dot. You know, you're going to be doing more damage with this, just plain and simple. So passives. Again, because I'm doing a higher torment, blur, I'm having a real hard time giving up this skill no matter what difficulty I'm doing. I mean, I guess on Torment 1 you don't need this. You could go Glass Cannon, but I just don't have the gear to take this off. So Blur is kind of mandatory. I do prefer Astral Presence. I think it's a really good skill. There's really not a whole lot else that you could really put here for damage output. You can't really do Unwavering Will because you will be moving around a lot, so you're really not going to be standing still. Elemental Exposure, I suppose, but and then obviously I talked about why you can't really use Glass Cannon and Audacity. This could be good. This could actually be good, and I may switch to this because, as you'll see, because this build doesn't have snares, mobs are going to be getting up in your face a lot quicker, and so this may have some merit to it. Conflagration, this is obvious. This is part of any fire build, and then I'm using Illusionist to help out with the teleport wormhole. This skill and this passive is, in my opinion, mandatory unless you just have really crazy overpowered gear for a certain difficulty. Like on Torment 1, I don't need any of these because I'll show you guys I can stand in ground effects and be perfectly fine. I never need to teleport out. But the higher torments, not so much. So, Paragon point allocation. The usual, movement. Get your movement speed from Paragon points, max your arcane power, the rest goes into int. Very straightforward here. Crit chance, crit damage. Always do crit chance first, followed by crit damage. I've explained this several times why. Attack speed last. Cooldown reduction you don't really need, just because there's really nothing here that you have on cooldown except for teleport, but you have Illusionist, so when you do need to use teleport, it's going to go off cooldown anyway. And attack speed last because you don't necessarily want to attack. You want to attack slower, but harder with this build. So defense, again, life regen, all resist first, followed by armor. I know, guys, life percentage will give you more toughness on paper, but it makes your healing a lot less effective. Talked about this many times as well. I'm not going to go too much into it. Utility tab, resource cost reduction, life on hit for sustain, and then max out area damage. Now let's talk about gear. With prismatic armor, I'm sitting at, some of these, like I'm sitting at 2,000 all resist here. Once you kind of break 10k int over here, you're going to be sitting at about 2k all resist. And if you can get about 2,000 here, and then like if you could somehow manage to get 10,000 armor, T6 would be a joke. But at these numbers, I'm kind of sitting good in solo play at T4, and then in group play I can do it very comfortably at T5. So let's look at gear, and we'll talk about kind of like what the ideal items are. So I'm still using rare boots, Vit, Int, all resist or armor, either one works, and then you want meteor damage on here. And then pants, you could use something with a proc on it. I just happen to have Depth Diggers. There's nothing special about them, just basically the rolls that you see here. Wishing Hour is very, very, very good belt. It's not the only option here, but I happen to find one, and it rolled pretty well. And this is, for a lot of classes and a lot of builds, this is a best in slot belt. Obviously, Cinder Coat. Mine didn't roll too well. It rolled armor instead of Vit, but the armor roll on it's still pretty decent, and I do need more armor. So, the important thing to note, though, is that it rolled perfect fire damage and very close to 2 points away from ideal fire skill cost reduction. So very, very nice here. Rings, you're going to want basically what you see here, which is crit chance, crit damage, main stat, and then average damage. You do not want attack speed. This is not an attack speed build. You're going to get plenty of it as is. Okay, same thing here. You want your meteors to hit hard. You don't want to drain your AP because, believe me, you're going to drain it anyway. Gloves, mage fists are ideal, but what you're looking at here, I kind of jacked this up. I kind of messed up here, guys, because this actually rolled Vitality, and I rerolled the Vitality to crit damage where I should have rerolled the attack speed. Because if I had the Vitality on here instead of the attack speed, my paper DPS would be a little bit lower, but I'd have so much more toughness, and I would be able to do energy armor, pinpoint barrier, not have to do prismatic armor, because my hit points are only at 272,000. So this is where I screwed up, and I'm going to have to find new mage fists and just redo it. And the reason I don't recommend going for trifecta, unless you really know what you're doing, unless you're like crazy well geared or you know exactly what you're doing and you're trying to hit some kind of breakpoints, do not get attack speed here. And the reason for that is because on gloves, main stat rolls and vitality rolls up to 750. Most other armor slots only rolls 500. So, you know, well, on helms roll 750 and amulets do too, but most other armor slots roll 500. So you want to take advantage of the higher stat rolls on gloves. But mage fists are ideal, so this would perfectly be crit chance, crit damage, vitality, int, and then fire skill damage. Shoulders, I just happen to have this one. I've been using it for a very long time, haven't found anything better. The proc on it is very nice. You could go for a lot of different things here. I'm not going to talk about it too much. Andy's helm is going to be best in slot. You want basically what you see here. So you want, you know, you're going to get the fire damage, the int, and the attack speed by default, and then you want crit damage or crit chance as the last thing. So there you go. Or if you had it, then you can actually reroll the attack speed to, I believe you could do like a socket or vitality. Amulet, there are several options you can use here. This one's nothing special, but these are the 4 rolls that you want on there: crit chance, crit damage, int, and fire skill damage. Bracers, again, there's a lot of options here, but what you see here, these are the 4 primaries that you want. We already looked at this ring, and so now this is where it gets interesting. So let's talk about sources and weapons and certain variations. So for source, there's really 2 options if you're going for a one-hand and source option. Ideally, you would use Mirror Ball with the 2 extra magic missiles. That would be perfect. But you don't always have that option. So, you know, I haven't found it. It's pretty rare. I believe it's the rarest one to find. So you end up with a couple other options here. And the other thing with Mirror Ball is it has a cost reduction roll on it. I believe it's called. It's one of those rolls on it that comes by default, so it actually has to roll perfectly so that you can reroll that stat and kind of have the same damage output. But Triumvirate works pretty well because, you know, you can get crit chance, and you can also get fire skill damage on here along with, you know, your 2 stat points. Even better would be Firebirds. I would have to reroll this because this can roll, you know, your skill damage. This can actually be a best in slot on par with the magic missile orb. And the reason for that is because it rolls fire damage, extra fire damage, 20%. It can roll meteor damage on it, and then you can reroll like the vitality. Let's say it rolled like that to crit chance. So this can actually have like trifecta damage. It can have meteor damage, it can have fire damage, int, and crit chance. This thing could be an absolute monster, but it's very hard to find as is, and you know, it has to roll correctly first. But this would trump everything else, and then you wouldn't even really use magic missile that much. Now, weapons, or one-handed weapon. For a one-handed weapon, in my opinion, this is best in slot. There is no better one, and I'll explain why. So the other 2 options, if you want, you know, to increase your skill damage or fire skill damage, would be Burning Axe of Sandkiss, or you could craft the Devastator. Between those 2, it's kind of a toss-up because Devastator's a mace that attacks slower, so it's better in that regard. But Burning Axe of Sandkiss has that legendary proc, which kind of gives you like I think it's around 30% damage reduction proc when it hits, but it's still situational. It is a faster attacking weapon. So those would be a couple options, but Sunkeeper is the best. And the reason it's the best is because of the elite damage modifier on it. So as everybody should know by now, white mobs are not a problem. It's elites that are going to kill you. And it's the elites that you're going to have the hardest time taking down. Well, even 20% against elite damage, or against elites, is going to be better than 20% fire damage. And the reason for that, and I'm going to make another video about this, is because of how percent damage modifiers are calculated. So they're not all multiplicative. They're multiplicative, or they're additive in the same type, and then they're multiplicative with each other. So try to follow along, guys. I'm going to give you a real simple example. Let's say Meteor does 100% weapon damage, and then you have 100% fire damage on top of that. Well, now Meteor would do 200% weapon damage. Okay, now let's say you add another 20% fire damage. Well, now Meteor would do 220, because all the fire damage modifiers, they're additive. But now, let's say instead of, let's say you have 100 fire damage, 100% extra fire damage, so Meteor hits for 200%, but then you add 20% elite damage. Well, now that's multiplicative. So now it's going to take that 200, add another 20% to it. So now against elites, your Meteors are going to hit for 240%, not 220. And on top of that, this can roll up to 30%. So when you combine this with like a Stone Jordan, unfortunately, I have one, but unfortunately it's not fire. But if you combine it with a SOJ and a high roll here and high damage, then you're just going to melt. You're going to absolutely melt elites, and that's endgame right there. That is absolutely endgame weapon. If someone can give me a compelling argument for why Sunkeeper for a build like this is not best in slot, I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts, because I cannot think of a better weapon than this. And please don't talk about the Shard of Hate or any of those weapons, or anything that even has a fast attack speed. It's not going to work as well for this build. So this is best in slot. Now, having said that, there's another option if you want to go with two-handers, and that's the Smoldering Core. I'm having a really hard time debating whether or not I want to use this, because on regular mobs, this is broken. This is so good against regular mobs, but it kind of sucks against elites. What it does, and I'll show you guys, is it's going to let's pop into Weeping Hollow. It's basically like a mini black hole against white mobs. So let's go ahead and find some. They're going to go straight to your Meteor impact area each time. They will never come to you. They're just basically going to be crowd controlled the entire time. Like, look at that. You will never, ever take any damage against regular mobs when you have this. So let's come over here. And this makes something like Torment 6 Hell Rift farming for XP super, super easy. They're just never going to get to you. Like, if you just keep casting Meteor, they'll always walk away from you. This is 100% crowd control. So this weapon is just silly good. And the problem, though, and why I'm not using it in a lot of cases, is because it doesn't work against elites. So, in a group, I may actually end up switching to this, because if you have like a pole monk, then you don't really have to worry about elites getting in your face. And it will make the meteors hit pretty hard, but unfortunately the damage output on two-handed weapons as a whole is still a little too low, in my opinion, and the stat ranges don't roll as high as a one-handed weapon and an offhand either. And so this, I'm going to get, I lose, what is it, 12% damage if I go with this, just sheet DPS, because I don't have the crit chance on here. And I'm also losing the 20% or up to 30% damage against elites. So it's just not, like, it's hard to make a case for this with this kind of DPS. And I think Blizzard will eventually change two-handed weapons to make them either do more damage or have them roll higher stats, because you can roll, you could roll 750 here, and you can roll 750 here. So this should, if it's going to be on par, it should be able to roll 1500 main stat, or just 1500 stats. And it should have a little bit higher damage, because if you take the average damage of this plus the average damage of this, it's still going to be lower than this, but not by a lot, like maybe 100 and 150 points. So it's hard to make a case for two-handers in most cases. There are some builds like Tempest Rush, Hoda Smash, Witch Doctor Dot build that would use two-handers, and of course the Crusader, but beyond that, hard to make a case for this, but this is an awesome weapon. So anyway, let's go ahead and do a little bit more rifting. And I wonder if I already kind of closed it, oops. But let's go ahead and see what a Torment 1 rift would look like. So we saw Torment 4. It's very doable. Prismatic armor is, here's some mobs here. Prismatic armor is necessary, to get a certain amount of toughness. I was doing this in group with about 5 million toughness with Pinpoint Barrier, and T4 with 5 mil toughness in a group like this is doable. You just have to play a little careful. If you're doing solo, because there's no snare here, it is going to kind of get in your face a little bit, and you're probably gonna die. Like, there's gonna be some things that just one-shot you, so you will have to go with higher toughness in order to be able to make it. And let's go ahead and maybe face off another elite so you guys can kind of see how this works on T4. And if you're going to go for a build like this, you do have to be kind of smart about where you cast your meteors. Once you get a certain degree of toughness, you basically just cast them on top of yourself, because that's, and I'm lagging really bad, that's where the mobs are going to be. And if you're running away, like if there's a mob right here and it's chasing you, don't cast it on the mob, don't cast it on yourself, cast it over here, because by the time you run here and the mob comes to you, if you time it correctly, that 1.5 second delay will cause the meteor to land right on top of the mob. So it's a gameplay change. It's not like frozen orb spam, but it works out pretty well. And once you kind of itemize for this a little bit better, again, I kind of screwed up with the. So here's one. I kind of screwed up with the Mage Fists, but once you itemize for it correctly, this will definitely be doable on T6. And again, my thing that I screwed up is, the toughness. I don't have enough. You do have to have a certain threshold, and I don't have it. And I'm probably going to die because I'm lagging so much. Something's going on with the servers. So anyway, guys, let's go ahead and drop this down, just so you guys can see what this looks like on a lower difficulty. Because on Torment 1, you will one-shot pretty much everything. Elites will take maybe 3 meteors or so to the face. And if Blizzard changes Scorch, which they may or may not, then I think it'll be a good replacement for Magic Missile. Just right now, the initial damage output is too low, and it's just it works kind of weird. If it had an explosion radius a little bit higher or something, I don't know. But yeah, everything here is basically one shot. And again, it's Torment 1, so not a big deal, but hopefully it'll track down an elite here. And then I'll show you guys how quickly they go down. So here we go, here's an elite. And it's down. So nothing to it. Meteors everywhere. The meteor Sork is back, guys. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. Thumbs up if you liked the video, sub if you haven't, and I'll see you guys soon.